I'm going to show you the Picot cast on and bind off now. The Picot cast on is used in the Lucky Clover scarf, and the Picot bind off is used both in the Lucky Clover scarf and in the Sand Dollar cape. The reason I used the Picot cast on and bind off in the Lucky Clover scarf is well, for several reasons actually. First of all, I wanted a cast on and bind off that were equally as stretchy. And if you see in this little sample here, there is really no difference between the cast on and the bind off. They're equally as stretchy and also extremely stretchy, which is what I needed for something that really used blocking to stretch out the fabric. Also, another reason to use the Picot bind off and cast on is it gives you great spots for pinning out when you're blocking. It gives you evenly spaced areas for blocking, which gives you a really nice finished look. And also, it's a technique also called Picot and Crochet that I thought would be fun to do, not only as the cast on and bind off on the scarf, but then also on the sides as well. I'd like to start by showing you the Picot cast on. Now, it's done in a full repeat, but in order to make the picots line up perfectly on the corners, I do a slight variation on the first one and then follow the regular repeat for the rest of the row. So we start off with casting on 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we bind off 2. Now, I remember when I first started knitting, binding off 2 was a little bit confusing because you actually use 3 stitches, so I'm going to point that out right now. We knit 1, knit 2, pass the first stitch up and over the first, that's bind off 1. So you actually use 2 stitches and bound off 1, and then you knit the next stitch and bind it off. That's bind off 2, and you slide that back to your left-hand needle. There's your first picot at the bottom of your stitches. Now you're also casting on differently now. That was a long tail cast on. For the remainder of the row, I'm going to do a knitted cast on, which means you insert your needle, pull up a loop, and then put it on the left-hand needle. That's cast on 1. Then we'll do a second one. We're going to do cast on 6 for this picot and also for every repeat going forward in this row. There's the third one. And I'm just going to slow it down here for one more. Insert, pull up a loop, and then slide it over to the left-hand needle. So you actually have to stretch it out and then tighten it back up. Okay, to finish this, I'm just going to go quickly on the last 2, just so you can see that you get to 6 stitches. And then once you have 6, you're going to bind off 2 again, taking up 3 stitches, but because that third one goes back to the left needle, it's really only counted as 2 bind off. So we knit 1, knit 2, pass the first stitch over the second, that's bind off 1, knit 1, pass the stitch over, and move it to the left-hand needle. That's bind off 2. So you're actually casting on 4 stitches from the 6 stitches that you cast on. You cast on 6, bind off 2, which gives you the picot, so that the repeat actually is a 4-stitch repeat. And that's what you'll do for the rest of the row. At that point, that was your corner one, and then you did your repeat, and you would just follow that along for the rest of the row, and then at the end of that row you'd have your repeat, and you'd be ready to start and do your pattern row. As you continue along and follow your pattern, you get to the bind off row. That's what I'll show you here. Now, you know how we did a special repeat at the beginning of the row for the corner? On the bind off row, we do that at the end. So I'm going to show you the regular repeat that you'll do all the way across, and then at the end you just do 2 fewer stitches like you did at the beginning of the cast on. So we start by knitting casting on 2 stitches. So we'll knit cast on 1, which pull up a loop, put it on the left-hand needle, pull up a loop, and put it on the left-hand needle. And then we cast off, or bind off 6 stitches. So we cast on 2, bind off 6, which gives you 6 minus 2 is a 4-stitch repeat bound off. So we'll knit 2, bind off 1, 2, whoops, 3, 4. And that's what you do for the rest of the row then. And like I said, that was the the technique we used for the shawl here, which was great for pinning out such a large circular shawl at the end. And that's our picot cast on and bind off.